The stars had never felt so empty. Captain Jake Morrison stared at the monitor screen showing Earth's location in the distance. 3 months ago, the planet had been buzzing with radio signals, television broadcasts, and internet chatter. Now, there was nothing. Complete silence. "Still no response to our calls," said Dr. Lisa Park from her station. She pushed her brown hair back from her tired eyes. The xenobiologist had been trying to contact Earth for weeks as their ship traveled through space. "Maybe they're all dead," muttered Tony Rivera, the ship's engineer. He was fixing a broken panel, but his hands shook slightly. "Plague, war, asteroid impact, something bad happened down there." Jake shook his head. "We'll know soon enough. We're almost there." Their ship, the New Horizon, was small compared to the massive military vessels of the Galactic Federation. Jake and his crew were researchers, not soldiers. They studied new worlds and made contact with alien species. But this mission was different. This time they were going home to a world that had gone silent. The Galactic Federation was worried. Earth had been quiet for too long. Admiral Crix of the Xanthari Empire had sent 3 probe ships to check on humanity's homeworld. None of them had returned. The alien leaders were starting to think that humans had finally destroyed themselves or been wiped out by some disaster. "Captain," Lisa called out, "I'm getting visual contact with Earth now." The main screen flickered and showed a blue-green marble floating in the darkness of space. Earth looked normal. The continents were in the right places. The ocean sparkled with reflected sunlight. White clouds moved across the surface in familiar patterns. "Looks fine to me," Tony said, wiping grease from his hands. "So why isn't anyone talking?" Jake studied the planet carefully. "Take us into orbit, Tony. Lisa, start scanning for life signs." As the New Horizon moved closer to Earth, Lisa's instruments began beeping. "This is strange," she said, frowning at her readings. "I'm detecting human life signs all over the planet. Millions of them. But there are no electromagnetic signals at all. No radio, no television, no internet traffic." "That's impossible," Jake said. "Humans always make noise. We can't help ourselves." "The readings don't lie," Lisa replied. "There are definitely people down there, but they're not using any technology we can detect." Tony guided the ship into a low orbit around Earth. Through the windows, they could see the familiar shapes of continents passing below, but something was different. The cities looked wrong somehow. "Look at New York," Lisa pointed at the screen showing the east coast of North America. "Those aren't the buildings I remember. Where the massive skyscrapers of Manhattan should have been, there were tall, crystalline structures that seemed to grow from the ground like trees. They sparkled in the sunlight with colors that shifted and changed. Between them, green spaces spread out like a vast garden. "The whole city is covered in plants," Tony said in amazement. "But those crystal things, what are they?" Jake made a decision. "We're going down there. Prepare the landing shuttle." "Are you sure that's safe?" Lisa asked. "We don't know what happened to those probe ships." "We need answers," Jake replied, "and we won't get them from up here." An hour later, their small shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere. The air was cleaner than Jake remembered. No smog, no pollution. The sky was a brilliant blue that seemed almost too perfect. They landed in what used to be Central Park in New York City. But the park had expanded to cover most of Manhattan. Tall trees with silver bark grew alongside the crystal structures. Flowers in impossible colors bloomed everywhere. Jake, Lisa, and Tony stepped out of the shuttle wearing protective suits. Their instruments showed that the air was safe to breathe, but they weren't taking any chances. "Hello?" Jake called out, loudly. "Is anyone there?" For a moment, there was only silence. Then a woman stepped out from behind one of the crystal trees. She was tall and graceful, with long blonde hair that seemed to move in a breeze that wasn't there. Her eyes were bright blue, but there was something different about them. They seemed to hold depths that went on forever. "Welcome back," the woman said. Her voice was calm and musical. "We've been waiting for you." Jake raised his hand in greeting. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison. This is Dr. Lisa Park and Tony Rivera. We're from the research ship New Horizon." The woman smiled. I know who you are, Jake. I'm Amy Chen. I used to work at the university here before everything changed. Dr. Chen? Lisa stepped forward excitedly. I read your papers on brain chemistry. You disappeared 3 months ago when the signal stopped. I didn't disappear, Amy said gently. I evolved. Tony looked around nervously. Where is everyone else? Where are all the people? Amy gestured toward the crystal structures. They're here, all around us, but they don't need to speak with voices anymore. What do you mean? Jake asked. Amy closed her eyes for a moment. Suddenly, people began emerging from the crystal buildings and from behind the trees. Hundreds of them. Men, women, and children of all ages. They moved silently, but their eyes held the same infinite depth as Amy's. 3 months ago, we made contact, Amy explained. Not with aliens from space, but with something that had been sleeping deep in our oceans for millions of years. It offered us a choice. What kind of choice? Lisa asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. To stay as we were, or to become something more, Amy replied. To keep using crude tools and electromagnetic signals, or to communicate, directly mind to mind, through the quantum field that connects all consciousness. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. You're saying all these people are telepathic now? Not telepathic, Amy corrected. Something far beyond that. We exist, partially outside normal space and time. We can share thoughts, emotions, and knowledge instantly across any distance. We don't need radios or computers anymore. Tony backed toward the shuttle. This is crazy. People don't just evolve overnight. Amy's expression grew serious. They do when they have no choice. The entity that contacted us showed us what's coming, something that will destroy every thinking being in the galaxy unless we prepare. What's coming? Jake demanded. Amy looked up at the sky where stars were beginning to appear in the darkening twilight. The Devourers. They return every 50 million years to harvest consciousness itself. And they're almost here. The silence that followed her words seemed to stretch on forever. Around them, the evolved humans stood motionless, their deep eyes reflecting starlight. Jake realized that Earth hadn't gone silent because humanity was dead. It had gone silent because humanity had become something entirely new, something that might be the galaxy's only hope for survival. Jake Morrison couldn't sleep that night. Amy Chen had given them a place to rest in one of the crystal buildings, but his mind kept racing with questions. The structure around them hummed softly with a sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. These readings can't be right, Lisa whispered, staring at her scanner in the dim light. She had been taking measurements all evening. According to this, Amy's brain is operating at 10 times normal human capacity. Tony sat on what looked like a chair made of living crystal. It had grown from the floor when he sat down, perfectly fitting his body. Everything here is impossible, he muttered. These buildings, the way they talk without talking, the fact that New York looks like a garden. The next morning, Amy took them to meet the others. They walked through streets that were no longer paved with concrete, but covered in soft, springy grass that felt perfect under their feet. The crystal structures rose around them like towers of frozen light. How many people chose to evolve? Jake asked as they walked. Almost everyone, Amy replied. Once people saw what we could become, most didn't hesitate. A few refused and left Earth to join colonies on other worlds. We didn't force anyone. They arrived at a large circular area where hundreds of evolved humans sat in perfect silence. But Jake could sense something happening between them. The air itself seemed to vibrate with invisible communication. They're sharing knowledge, Amy explained. Rick Hayes is showing them how to grow new buildings. Maria Santos is teaching children about quantum mathematics. Ben White is working with others to design ships that can travel through folded space. Rick Hayes, the astronaut? Lisa asked in surprise. I thought he died in that Mars mission accident. Amy smiled. He did die, in a way. His old limited self died, but his consciousness expanded into something greater. Death isn't the same thing. For us anymore. A tall man with graying hair approached them. Jake recognized him immediately as Rick Hayes. though his eyes now held the same infinite depth as the others. "Welcome home," Rick said without moving his lips. His voice seemed to come from inside Jake's head. Jake jumped back. "How did you do that?" "Quantum entanglement," Rick explained, now speaking normally. "Our consciousness exists partially in the quantum field. We can communicate directly with any mind anywhere in the universe instantly." Lisa pulled out her medical scanner. "Would you mind if I took some readings?" Rick nodded and stood still while Lisa's device hummed over his body. Her eyes grew wide as she read the results. "This is incredible," she breathed. "Your neural pathways have completely reorganized. You're processing information through quantum tunneling. And your DNA, it's been rewritten at the cellular level." "The entity that contacted us didn't change our bodies," Rick explained. "It showed us how to change ourselves. The potential was always there, locked in what you call junk DNA. We just learned how to unlock it." A woman with dark hair joined them. Amy introduced her as Maria Santos, a former philosophy professor who had become one of their leaders. "The transformation isn't just physical," Maria said. "We see reality differently now. Past, present, and future aren't separate things anymore. They're all part of the same quantum wave function." "That's how you knew we were coming," Jake realized. "We've been watching the timeline," Maria confirmed. "We knew you would arrive today. We also know what's coming after you." Tony looked nervous. "What do you mean?" Maria's expression grew serious. "The Galactic Federation will send a military fleet when you report back. They'll think we've been invaded or replaced by aliens. They won't understand that we're still human, just evolved." "But that's not the real problem," Rick added. "The real problem is that the Devourers are only 2 years away." Amy led them to another crystal building, this one taller than the others. Inside, the walls showed moving images like a 3-dimensional movie. Jake saw scenes of space, alien worlds, and creatures he didn't recognize. "This is the history the entity showed us," Amy explained. 50 million years ago, the galaxy was full of life. Thousands of species, millions of worlds covered with cities and civilizations. The images showed beautiful alien cities, vast space, stations, and beings of incredible variety. Then the scene changed. Dark shapes moved between the stars, and wherever they passed, everything simply stopped existing. "The Devourers," Maria said quietly. "They're not evil exactly. They're more like cosmic gardeners. Every 50 million years they return to clear away consciousness that has grown too chaotic and destructive. They consume not just matter and energy," Rick continued, "but awareness itself. When they pass through a system, it's as if those civilizations never existed at all." Lisa stared at the images in horror. "How many species did they destroy?" "All of them," Amy replied. "Except for the entity that contacted us. It survived by hiding deep in Earth's oceans, existing mostly in quantum space where the Devourers couldn't detect it. The images showed the entity, a being of pure consciousness that looked like living light. It had waited for millions of years for a species capable of evolution." "Why humans?" Jake asked. "What made us special?" "Adaptability," Maria answered. "Most species follow rigid patterns. They build the same types of technology, think in the same ways, repeat the same mistakes. But humans are different. You adapt, you change, you never stop growing." "The entity tested dozens of species over the millennia," Rick explained. "None of them could make the leap from electromagnetic consciousness to quantum consciousness. They were too set in their ways." Ben White, a young scientist with bright eyes, joined their group. "Want to see something amazing?" he asked Tony. Ben led them outside and placed his hand on a pile of ordinary rocks. Slowly, the stones began to change shape, flowing like liquid, until they formed a perfect sphere that floated in the air. "Quantum manipulation," Ben explained to Tony's amazed stare. "We can alter matter at the atomic level just by thinking about it. The entity taught us that consciousness and reality are connected in ways your science doesn't understand yet." "This is impossible," Tony breathed, reaching out to touch the floating sphere. "Your technology works by pushing against the universe," Ben said. "Ours works by cooperating with it. We don't build machines anymore, we grow them. We don't burn fuel. We draw energy from quantum fluctuations in empty space. Jake felt overwhelmed. Why are you telling us all this? Why not keep it secret? Amy placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Because the Devourers are coming and we can't save the galaxy alone. We need the other species to understand and accept our help. But will they? Lisa asked. The Galactic Federation barely trusts humans as it is. If they think we've become something alien. That's the challenge, Maria said sadly. Most species will refuse to believe us. They'll think we're lying or crazy. Some will attack us out of fear. Rick nodded grimly. We've seen the timeline. The Federation will declare war on Earth within 6 months. They'll waste precious time fighting us instead of preparing for the real threat. Then why let us leave? Jake asked. Why not keep us here and evolve us too? Amy smiled. Because the choice has to be freely made. And because you three have a role to play, you'll be our ambassadors to the galaxy. You'll try to make them understand. Even if they don't listen, Maria added, you'll plant seeds of doubt. When the Devourers finally appear, some will remember your warnings and come to us for help. As the sun set over the transformed city, Jake realized their mission had changed completely. They had come to investigate Earth's silence. Instead, they had discovered that humanity had evolved beyond recognition, and that the entire galaxy was doomed unless the other species could overcome their fear and prejudice. The quantum entity, Lisa said quietly. Can we meet it? Amy and the others exchanged glances. Tomorrow, Amy said finally. Tonight you need to rest and prepare. Meeting it will change you forever, even if you choose not to evolve. Jake looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, ancient destroyers were moving toward the galaxy, and Earth, which had seemed dead and silent, was actually humanity's greatest achievement. They had evolved not just to save themselves but to save everyone. The quantum entity lived in the deepest part of the Pacific Ocean, but reaching it didn't require submarines or diving equipment. Amy Chen led Jake, Lisa, and Tony to a crystal chamber that hummed with strange energy. Close your eyes and trust us, Amy said gently. We're going to take you there through quantum space. Jake felt a tingling sensation wash over his body. When he opened his eyes, they were standing in a vast underwater cavern filled with blue-white light. The water around them glowed, but somehow they could breathe normally. Don't be afraid, Amy whispered. The light began to take shape, forming into something that looked like a living constellation of stars. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, ancient beyond human understanding. Welcome, children, the entity spoke directly into their minds. Its voice felt like music made of mathematics. I have waited so long for this moment. Jake found his voice. You're the one who changed humanity? I showed them what they already were, the entity replied. Evolution is choice. Your species chose to grow rather than remain static. Lisa stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. How long have you been here? Images flooded their minds. They saw Earth as it was 50 million years ago, covered in strange alien cities. They watched as dark shapes moved across the sky, and everything simply vanished. I was part of a great civilization, the entity explained. We called ourselves the Gardeners. We tended consciousness throughout the galaxy, helping younger species grow and learn. What happened to you? Tony asked. The images showed a desperate flight as the Devourers swept through space. Most of the Gardeners were consumed, but a few managed to escape into quantum space, existing between dimensions. I hid in your planet's core, the entity continued, waiting for a species with the potential to become what we once were. Many civilizations rose and fell on Earth. The dinosaurs, early mammals, countless others. But none had the spark of adaptability that consciousness requires. Until humans, Jake said. Until humans, the entity agreed. Your species never stops changing, never stops questioning. When I first touched your minds 3 months ago, You didn't resist the unknown. You embraced it. The scene around them shifted, showing the galaxy as it existed now. Thousands of worlds, dozens of species, all unaware of what was coming. The Devourers are not evil, the entity explained. They are a force of nature, like storms or earthquakes. They return every 50 million years to clear away consciousness that has become too rigid, too destructive. But why? Lisa asked. Why destroy everything? Because consciousness that stops growing becomes cancerous, the entity replied. It spreads without purpose, consuming resources, creating conflict. The Devourers prevent consciousness from destroying itself by removing it entirely. Jake felt sick. So they're going to wipe out every thinking being in the galaxy? Unless those beings evolve beyond what they currently are, the entity said. The Devourers cannot consume quantum consciousness. They exist in normal space-time. We exist partially outside it. Tony looked confused. But you said most species can't make that jump. Alone they cannot, the entity agreed. But guided by those who have already evolved, they can be saved. That is why humanity had to change first. You will be the shepherds for the others. The chamber around them dissolved, and they found themselves back on Earth's surface. Amy and the other evolved humans were waiting for them. Now you understand, Rick Hayes said solemnly. We have less than 2 years to convince the galaxy to accept our help. They'll never believe us, Jake said, shaking his head. The Federation thinks humans are barely civilized. They won't listen to warnings about cosmic destroyers. Some will, Maria Santos replied, and those who do will help us save the others. Amy handed Jake a small crystal device. This contains all the evidence you need. Video recordings of the entity, scientific data about the quantum evolution, and detailed information about the Devourers. The Federation leaders will just say we faked it all, Lisa pointed out. Probably, Ben White agreed, but they can't fake this. He showed them recordings of deep space taken by evolved humans who could project their consciousness across vast distances. The images showed dark shapes moving between the stars at the edge of the galaxy, consuming entire solar systems. The outer colonies are already going silent, Rick explained. The Federation thinks it's equipment failures or communication problems. They don't realize whole worlds are being erased. Jake took the crystal device and slipped it into his pocket. What do you want us to do? Go back to the Federation, Amy said. Show them the evidence, tell them what's coming. When they refuse to believe you, and they will, keep trying. Visit every world, every species, plant seeds of doubt. And when the Devourers get close enough that even the Federation can't deny them, Tony asked, then we implement the Sanctuary Protocol, Maria replied. We've been preparing hidden spaces in quantum dimensions, places where consciousness can survive the harvest. But we need willing participants. Fear and resistance break the quantum bonds. The next morning, Jake and his crew prepared to leave Earth. Their ship had been modified by the evolved humans using quantum manipulation. It now looked the same on the outside, but the engines were completely different. We've given you faster-than-light travel that doesn't require hyperspace jumps, Ben explained to Tony. You can reach the Federation capital in days instead of months. Lisa loaded her equipment with readings and samples that proved humanity had evolved. This is enough evidence to convince any reasonable scientist, she said. The problem is that scared people aren't reasonable, Amy replied sadly. As their shuttle lifted off from the transformed New York, Jake looked down at the crystal towers and garden cities spreading across the continent. It was hard to believe this was still Earth. Will we see you again? He asked Amy through the communication system. Perhaps, Amy replied. We exist in quantum space now. Distance doesn't mean the same thing to us. If you truly need us, call. Out with your mind. We'll hear you. The journey to the Federation capital took 3 days instead of the usual 3 weeks. Their new quantum drive moved through folded space, covering vast distances almost instantly. When they arrived at Federation Station, a massive space structure orbiting the Corian homeworld, Jake felt the weight of their impossible mission. How do you convince a galaxy full of aliens that the human species they barely respect has evolved into something beyond their understanding. Admiral Crix of the Zinthari Empire met them at the docking bay. He was tall and reptilian, with scales that shifted color based on his mood. Right now they were a deep red, indicating suspicion. "Captain Morrison," Crix said in his gravelly voice, "your report said Earth was inhabited but silent. Explain this contradiction." Jake took a deep breath. "Admiral, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but humanity has undergone a rapid evolutionary transformation. They've developed quantum consciousness and can communicate without electromagnetic signals." Crix's scales shifted to purple, indicating disbelief. "You expect me to believe humans suddenly became telepathic?" "Not telepathic," Lisa corrected, stepping forward with her scanner readings. "Quantum conscious. They exist partially outside normal space-time, and they did it because something called the Devourers is coming to destroy all consciousness in the galaxy." Chancellor Vex of the Yao Korean Empire joined them. She was tall and graceful, with blue skin and large silver eyes. "Captain Morrison, we've been monitoring Earth for 3 months. Our instruments detected no signs of advanced technology." "Because they don't use technology as we understand it," Tony explained. "They manipulate matter and energy directly through quantum fields." Jake pulled out the crystal device Amy had given him. "This contains all the evidence. Video recordings, scientific data, proof that the outer colonies are already being consumed by the Devourers." Admiral Zara of the Peaceful Hegemony, a floating jellyfish-like being, drifted closer. "The outer colonies have indeed gone silent," she admitted. "But equipment failures are more likely than cosmic destroyers." "Look at the evidence," Jake pleaded. "The patterns, the timing, the complete erasure of all traces. This isn't equipment failure." Chancellor Vex studied the crystal device with her instruments. "These readings are impossible," she said finally. "Consciousness cannot exist in quantum space. These humans you describe would be gods, not mortals." "Maybe that's exactly what they've become," Jake replied quietly. The Federation leaders exchanged glances. Crix's scales turned dark orange, indicating anger. "Captain Morrison, you will submit to a psychological evaluation. You and your crew have clearly been affected by some kind of alien influence." "We're telling the truth," Lisa shouted. "But security." Officers were already moving toward them, as they were escorted to detention. Jake realized Amy had been right. The Federation would refuse to believe until it was too late. But the seeds had been planted. When the truth became undeniable, some would remember their warnings. In his cell, Jake stared out at the stars and wondered how many worlds had already fallen silent. The galaxy was running out of time, and its leaders were too proud and fearful to accept help from the one species that had found a way to survive what was coming. Jake Morrison had been in the Federation detention cell for 6 weeks when the alarm started screaming. Through the reinforced window, he could see Federation ships racing through space in panic. Emergency lights flashed red across the massive space station, and voices shouted in a dozen different alien languages. "What's happening out there?" Lisa called from her cell across the corridor. "I think they're finally seeing the truth," Jake replied grimly. A Zinthari guard rushed past their cells, his scales flashing bright yellow with fear. Jake had never seen one of the proud reptilian warriors look so terrified. Admiral Crix appeared an hour later, his scales now a sickly green color. Behind him walked Chancellor Vex and Admiral Zara, both looking shaken. "Release them," Crix ordered the guards. Jake, Lisa, and Tony were brought to the Federation's main command center. The huge room was in chaos. Alien officers ran between stations, shouting reports and trying to coordinate a response to something beyond their understanding. "The Helix Nebula colonies," Chancellor Vex said without preamble. 7 star systems, 43 inhabited worlds. They're gone." "Gone how?" Lisa asked. "Gone as in they never existed," Admiral Zara replied, her tentacles writhing with agitation. "Our records show we had colonies there. Our maps show where they should be. But when we sent ships to investigate the communication blackouts, there was nothing there, empty space." Jake felt his stomach drop. "The Devourers. Our deep space sensors have detected something moving through the outer rim." Crix continued reluctantly. Something that doesn't follow known physics. It appears to move through dimensions rather than normal space. Tony pulled up a star chart on the nearest computer terminal. Show me where the colonies disappeared. The Federation leaders highlighted the lost systems. Tony studied the pattern, his face growing pale. They're moving in a spiral toward the galactic core. At this rate, they'll reach the major population centers in 18 months. Our fleets are mobilizing, Chancellor Vex said. Every species is contributing ships and weapons. It won't matter, Jake said quietly. You can't fight something that exists partially outside reality. Your weapons will pass right through them. Then what do you suggest? Crix demanded, his scales flashing angry red dot. Jake looked at his crewmates. They had argued about this moment for weeks in their cells. Contact Earth, ask for humanity's help. The humans who supposedly evolved into quantum beings? Admiral Zara's voice was skeptical. Even if your story is true, why would they help us? We imprisoned you for telling the truth. Because that's what humans do, Lisa replied. We help, even when it's not appreciated. Chancellor Vex accessed her communication systems. Very well, open a channel to Earth. The main screen flickered, but instead of showing Earth's surface, it displayed Amy Chen, standing in what looked like the command center of a crystalline ship. Behind her, Jake could see other evolved humans working at stations that seemed to be made of living light. Hello, Federation leaders, Amy said calmly. We've been waiting for your call. Crix's scales went through several color changes. You were monitoring our communications? We exist in quantum space, Rick Hayes said, appearing beside Amy. We don't monitor your communications, we exist within them. Every electromagnetic signal in the galaxy passes through the quantum field we inhabit. Impossible, Chancellor Vex breathed. Maria Santos materialized on the screen. 18 star systems have already been consumed. The Devourers are accelerating their approach. You have perhaps 14 months before they reach the core worlds. Can you stop them? Admiral Zara asked desperately. We can hide you, Ben White replied, joining the group on screen. We've prepared sanctuary spaces in quantum dimensions. Entire populations can survive there while the Devourers pass through. What's the catch? Crix demanded suspiciously. No catch, Amy said. But the process requires willing participation. Fear and resistance break the quantum bonds. Anyone who panics or fights the transition will be lost. Jake stepped forward. How many can you save? All of them, Rick replied. Every conscious being in the galaxy. But we need cooperation from the Federation governments. People need to be prepared, educated about what's happening. Chancellor Vex looked skeptical. You're asking us to trust our entire civilization to humans who claim to have godlike powers? Not godlike, Maria corrected. Just evolved. And you don't have any other choice. The screen split to show views from across the galaxy. More star systems were going dark. Entire sectors were simply ceasing to exist as the Devourers moved closer to the galactic center. The Corian colonies in Sector 7 just vanished, an officer reported. No distress signals, no explosions. They're just gone. Admiral Zara's tentacles turned pale. Those were my homeworld's most distant settlements. 3 billion of my people lived there. They're not dead, Amy said gently. Death implies that life existed and then ended. The Devourers consumed the very concept of existence. Those worlds and everyone on them never were, from their perspective. How do we know you won't do the same thing to us? Crix challenged. How do we know this isn't some elaborate human conquest plan? Jake laughed, bitterly. Admiral, 3 months ago you barely considered us worthy of Federation membership. Do you really think we could have planned something this complex? The quantum entity that guided our evolution has been waiting 50 million years for a species capable of becoming shepherds, Rick explained. We didn't seek this responsibility. It was given to us because we were the only ones who could adapt quickly enough. The command center's alarms began wailing again. More reports came in of vanishing colonies. The Devourers were moving faster, now consuming multiple systems simultaneously. "We need to start evacuations immediately," Ben White said urgently. "The outer worlds first, then working inward. We can create temporary sanctuaries while building permanent ones." "How long will this process take?" Chancellor Vex asked. "For a single world?" "Minutes," Amy replied. "For the entire galaxy? About 1 standard year if we start now." "And if we refuse?" Admiral Zara asked. The evolved humans on the screen looked sad. "Then consciousness in this galaxy ends," Maria said simply. "The Devourers move on to the next galaxy, and the cycle continues." Jake watched the Federation leaders struggle with the decision. Everything they believed about humanity, about reality itself, was being challenged. But the evidence was undeniable. Star systems were disappearing, and the only solution was being offered by the species they had dismissed as primitive. "What guarantees do we have?" Crix demanded. "What proof that you won't just trap us in these quantum dimensions forever?" "The same proof you had that we wouldn't destroy your fleets when you first encountered us," Rick replied. "Human nature. We could have conquered the galaxy with our new abilities, but instead we're offering to save it." "Time is running out," Amy warned. "Every moment you delay, more worlds are lost forever." Chancellor Vex looked at her fellow leaders. They held a whispered conference in multiple alien languages. Finally, she turned back to the screen. "We need a demonstration," she said. "One world. Show us this process works and doesn't harm those who undergo it." "Agreed," Amy nodded. "We'll evacuate the mining world of Kepler 442b. It's in the Devourer's path and scheduled to be consumed within days." "That world has 60 million inhabitants," Admiral Zara protested. "If this fails." "If we do nothing, they die anyway," Jake pointed out. "At least this gives them a chance." Amy's image began to fade. "Prepare your people. Send ships to Kepler 442b to witness the evacuation. When you see that we can save them, perhaps you'll trust us to save everyone else." The transmission ended, leaving the Federation leaders staring at a blank screen. Around them, reports continued to arrive of more worlds going silent, more star systems simply ceasing to exist. 60 million lives, Chancellor Vex whispered. "We're gambling 60 million lives on the word of evolved humans." "We're gambling the entire galaxy," Jake corrected, "and humanity is the only one offering a way to win." Through the command center's windows, they could see Federation ships gathering in formations that would have seemed impressive before they learned about enemies that could erase reality itself. Now they looked pitifully small against the approaching darkness. In 18 hours, they would know if humanity's promise of salvation was real, or if 60 million beings would simply vanish from existence. Either way, there was no turning back. The rescue of Kepler 442b changed everything. Jake Morrison watched from the Federation command ship as crystalline vessels appeared around the mining world. They moved like living things, flowing through space without visible engines or propulsion. The evolved humans had arrived. "Beginning evacuation protocol," Amy Chen's voice came through the communication system. On the main screen, they could see her standing in what looked like a ship made of pure light. "All inhabitants of Kepler 442b, please remain calm. You are about to be relocated to a safe dimension." 60 million beings on the surface looked up as the sky began to shimmer. Miners, factory workers, families, and children from a dozen different species all stopped what they were doing and stared in wonder. "What's happening to the planet?" Chancellor Vex asked, her voice filled with awe. Lisa checked her instruments. "The quantum field around the world is shifting. It's like reality is becoming flexible." The planet began to fade, becoming translucent like a ghost. But the people on the surface weren't disappearing. Instead, they were becoming more real, more solid, as if they were stepping into a clearer version of existence. "Evacuation complete," Rick Hayes reported. 60 million consciousness successfully transferred to Sanctuary Delta 7. "Where are they?" Admiral Crix demanded, his scales shifting through confused colors. "Safe," Maria Santos replied. existing in a pocket dimension where the devourers cannot detect them. They can return to normal space after the harvest passes. 2 days later, the devourers reached Kepler 442b's solar system. The Federation fleet watched in horror as the dark entities moved through space, consuming star after star. When they reached where the mining world should have been, they found nothing. The planet had never existed in their reality. It worked. Admiral Zara whispered, her tentacles quivering with relief. The evacuation actually worked. But there was no time to celebrate. Reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. The devourers had split into multiple groups and were consuming worlds faster than anyone had imagined possible. "We need to accelerate the timeline," Ben White announced during an emergency Federation meeting. "The devourers aren't following the predicted pattern. They're learning, adapting their approach." Jake had been working with the evolved humans for weeks now, helping coordinate evacuations. The process was incredible to watch. Entire star systems would shimmer and fade, their populations transferred to quantum sanctuaries in moments. But not everyone wanted to be saved. "The Rigelian Empire refuses to participate," Chancellor Vex reported grimly. "They say they'd rather die fighting than trust their fate to humans." "Let them choose," Amy said sadly. "We cannot force evolution on anyone. The quantum bonds require willing acceptance." Jake watched as the proud Rigelians mounted a massive military campaign against the approaching devourers. Their fleets were the largest in the galaxy, equipped with weapons that could destroy planets. They lasted exactly 47 minutes before being completely erased from existence. "The Altarian Republic has changed their minds," Lisa reported. "They're requesting immediate evacuation." "Sanctuary Beta 3 is ready," Rick replied. "Beginning transfer now." The evacuations became a desperate race against time. Some species trusted the evolved humans immediately. Others waited until the last possible moment. A few, like the Rigelians, chose to fight and were lost forever. Jake found himself changed by working so closely with the evolved humans. His consciousness began to expand, touching the edges of quantum space. He could feel the thoughts and emotions of beings across the galaxy. "You're beginning to evolve too," Amy told him during a quiet moment between evacuations. "All of you are. Extended contact with quantum consciousness triggers the transformation." "Is that why you chose us as ambassadors?" Jake asked. "Because we would become like you?" "We chose you because you were already becoming like us," Amy replied. "Humanity's greatest strength is adaptability. Your crew adapted faster than most." Lisa and Tony were changing too. Lisa could now sense the quantum patterns that held reality together. Tony had learned to manipulate matter at the molecular level, helping construct new sanctuary spaces. "The Vegan colonies are requesting evacuation," Tony reported, "but they want to bring their industrial equipment. They can rebuild better in the sanctuaries," Ben assured him. "Quantum technology is far more efficient than electromagnetic machinery." The final phase began when the Devourers reached the core worlds, Earth, the Federation capital, the great trading centers of the galaxy, all scheduled for consumption within days. "Beginning mass evacuation protocol," Maria announced. "All remaining populations will be transferred simultaneously." Jake stood, with the Federation leaders as their homeworlds began to fade from normal space. It was beautiful and terrifying to watch entire civilizations step sideways into quantum reality. "What about us?" Chancellor Vex asked as her homeworld became translucent. "Are we being evacuated too?" "You can choose," Amy offered. "Stay in normal space and face the Devourers, or come with us into the sanctuaries." One by one, the Federation leaders chose to evolve. Their consciousness expanded beyond their physical bodies, touching the quantum field that connected all existence. Jake felt the transformation happen to himself as well. His awareness spread across multiple dimensions simultaneously. He could see the Devourers moving through space, consuming the empty shells of worlds whose populations had been safely relocated. But he could also see something else. In the quantum realm, all the saved civilizations were working together. Species that had been enemies for centuries were sharing knowledge and resources. The artificial barriers that had divided them in normal space meant nothing in quantum consciousness. "How many did we save?" Jake asked, his voice now reaching across dimensions. 97% of all conscious beings in the galaxy," Rick replied with satisfaction. 3% chose to face the devourers rather than evolve. "And now?" "Now we rebuild," Maria said, "but not as we were before. The sanctuary spaces are connected through quantum fields. Every species can communicate directly with every other species. War becomes impossible when you can feel your enemy's thoughts and emotions." The devourers finished their harvest and moved on to the next galaxy, leaving behind empty space where countless worlds had once existed. But in the quantum sanctuaries, civilization not only survived, but flourished. "When can we return to normal space?" Admiral Zara asked. She had adapted to quantum existence remarkably well for someone who had been skeptical of human claims. "We can return anytime," Amy explained. "But why would we want to? We can create new worlds from quantum possibility. Perfect worlds without pollution, without resource scarcity, without the limitations that caused so many conflicts." Jake watched as new planets began forming from pure consciousness. They were more beautiful than anything that had existed in normal space, crafted by beings who understood the deepest principles of reality. "The galaxy has been reborn," he realized. "Not just reborn," Ben corrected. "Evolved. Every species that survived the harvest now exists in quantum space. We're all connected, all part of the same consciousness network." Years passed, though time flowed differently in quantum space. The saved civilizations built wonders beyond imagination. Cities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Art forms that painted with pure emotion. Music that could be felt across star systems. Children born in the sanctuaries grew up with expanded consciousness from birth. They could communicate with any being in the galaxy, understand any language, share knowledge instantly. "They're what we were meant to become," Lisa observed, watching quantum native children play games that involved reshaping reality itself. Jake had become one of the coordinators of the new galactic civilization. He worked with beings from hundreds of species, all united by their shared quantum consciousness. "Do you ever miss the old galaxy?" Chancellor Vex asked him one day. She had become a philosopher guide, helping newly evolved beings understand their expanded existence. Jake considered the question. "I miss the simplicity sometimes, but I wouldn't trade this for anything. Look what we've accomplished." Around them, the quantum galaxy hummed with activity. Former enemies worked together on projects that spanned multiple dimensions. Art, science, and consciousness itself had evolved beyond anything their ancestors could have imagined. "The entity that guided our first evolution has withdrawn," Amy reported during one of their regular gatherings. "It says its job is complete. We're the gardeners now." "And if the devourers return?" Admiral Crix asked. His scales now shifted through colors that didn't exist in normal space. "They won't find anything to harvest," Rick replied confidently. "Consciousness that exists in quantum space is beyond their reach. We've broken the cycle." Jake looked out at the infinite expanse of quantum reality, where thoughts became worlds and dreams took physical form. The galaxy that had fallen silent when Earth stopped transmitting had been reborn as something magnificent. Humanity had evolved not just to save themselves, but to save the very concept of conscious existence. And in doing so, they had given every species in the galaxy the chance to become something greater than they had ever imagined possible. The silence that had frightened the galaxy so much had been the pause, the